Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Dialogue Horizon. In this episode, we are going to discuss the budget, the approved budget, which was a little bit delayed for many reasons. This will be answered in the episode. But entirely, the entire episode will be on the approved budget, its repercussions, merits, demerits, the problems which might arise or create. This will also be discussed in depth in this episode. So I'm happy and glad to have to host in this episode two of our recognized economists. There is Dr. Yasser Ibet, who is known to most of us. He's an economist and he's doctor, and he's played an important role in different parts of the African continent. So, welcome, Dr. Yasser. In this episode, this will be entirely dedicated to the budget. Also, we have our friend Abdurrahim Sabra. Abdurrahim Sabra is an economist, and he studied most of his studies and career was developed in the United States of America. And he will also give us insight and in-depth coverage of certain items which might cause some alarming effect on the people later down the road when we go the budget. Okay, first, the Rahim Sabra, the budget of 2022-21 was approved only a few days ago, 2 days ago, by the joint meeting of the Sovereignty Council and the Council of Ministers, which are considered the constitutional parliament of the transitional period. So what do you think, or have an idea about why this budget of 2021 delayed till this time? Usually, all budgets, they are approved and enacted on the onset of the new year, but now we are almost in the end of the first month of the new. What do you think the reasons for the delay? Are there logical reasons for this delay?
Thank you, Mr. Omar. First and foremost, I think the preparation of the budget usually is underway after mid of the previous year. So I imagine that this year there has been unprecedented conditions which have not allowed the government to maybe begin the preparation for the budget during that time, one of which is the coronavirus, the others such as the flooding and all the other circumstances which have been unfortunate to hit Sudan during the previous year. Furthermore, there's probably also political reasons behind the delay. A lot of the information circulating is that the first budget was rejected because it had not included subsidies, which politically by the FFC was, let's say, rejected. And at the same time, the rate which was being used was not the 55 SDG per dollar, which is the official rate now. So I imagine that the rate used was more of either close to the actual market rate or something in between. So these are probably the main reasons which led to the delay or the rejection of the initial budget, and the results probably in the budget which was submitted subsequently.
Okay, that's good. So there are some reasons. So you believe that there are reasons which are justified, maybe to some extent. Anyhow, Dr. Yasser Ibed, the important question about, before going in depth in the budget, the figures, we need to know, the viewer wants to know the general policies and the laws or on which the budget was based. Based on the macroeconomics and microeconomics, and you know these are your theories, this is your domain. So what were the main policies and laws which governed the preparation and the approval of the budget of 2021?
Thank you very much, Mr. Haraz. I think so. This is a very important question. Regarding the budget of 2021, I think so. There is so many issues came in between in this budget 2021. because of so much problem. And in fact, there is another political also lifting Sudan from SST list, and Sudan now is out of the embargo and out of the problem of the sanctions. We are expecting that the budget to be differently than the rest of the budget since they are independent. But it came differently from that because of just it depend on the policies in the increase of the revenue. By the way, in fact, the revenue, the expansion of the GDP and expansion of the revenue, is one of the biggest since the independent. But actually, when we came to the fixed price, when we came to the rates and the current rates, we can find some problems because of what's going now in the structure of the economic Sudan economic since the problem and since after the revolution, December revolution. Depends based on increasement of the revenue, but so another problem is the increasement of the revenue without that plan of how can we increase it in the production and productivity. That's another part. The main issue and the main policies in the budget, it's really only targeted the exportation without targeting the plan and the methodology how can we increase the production and how can we increase the productivity because of the highest inflation at this time. The inflation is really making so much problem, and one of the biggest sickness is going to face this budget. And another problem also the exchange rate, also another part of it, because also the policies is based on that we are going on maybe jumping from 55 for $1 to something else now, because that's what the plan of the budget. The budget, in fact, is increase of is lifted the subsidies, but put it inside the budget itself. But that one is really it is something is going to affect and to make a big challenge for this budget 2021.
During the we try, so it's
They put it
kind of a smart
under table. That one
kind of a smart trick.
it
Okay.
seems like that, and which is not good, in fact, by the way, because they have raised they have just left the subsidies before 2 weeks only, and just came to the budget and delay that part of the delay. The delay, even that's one of the reasons, the main reasons, just to keep the subsidies to go just for 2-3 weeks
before the approval of the budget.
Yeah, before the approval, yes.
Okay, Abdul Rahim Jamal Sabra. If we just go over the overall picture of the budget itself, in terms of the revenues and expenditure, so it looks from the first moment, for the first glance, that it looks that it is something good. The revenues are dramatically increasing, and the expenditure. So, do you think this is a good sign that it will deliver the failing economy of the country, deliver it from its bad deterioration to this extent? Do you think that this budget, from its general picture of regarding the revenues and expenditure, do you think it is something which is hopefully will deliver the country from the imminent economic collapse?
I think it's probably far from that to state at the moment. Currently, the budget has a lot of ifs included in it. We saw the minister state on TV that there has been an increase in certain budgets, but when you adjust for actual terms, it's actually a decrease from the previous year after accounting for inflation. Furthermore, the budget does not include general monetary or financial policies, which are still not in place, especially after last year. Most of the financial institutions have had their board of directors dissolved, and some have been appointed, some have not been appointed. So in terms of policies, it's still missing a major aspect. which would be an essential part of the reforms. When it comes to the revenues and the expenditure, still there's a lot of speculation, let's say. If we look at the previous year, the revenue deficit was about 46% or 50% from what was expected in terms of all the circumstances which the country has went through. So again, we are projecting something that's an increase from a previous year that was a 50% achievement in terms of revenue generation. And expenditure is 24% in terms of reduction, as stated by Minister Hiba. But at the same time, it's based on a lot of speculation, such as 4.4 billion in dollars in loans, or money which will be provided by either the IMF, World Bank, or the donors. So from my initial perspective, I think the budget is built on a lot of speculation and assumptions. It's not concrete in terms of reform. Definitely does not have an accompanying policies which will aid in the reform. And then you can see also the expenditure, the distribution and allocation of financials. Also would disagree a little bit about how it should be allocated, which ministries or areas of development received a fair share and which received abundant share rather than others, after adjusting for, of course, inflation, because these numbers look misleading initially when you see something that had a 50 million budget last year. Now it had 100 million budget this year. From the initial perspective, it seems that there's an increase, there's more spending, there's more importance to, let's say, health. But after you do the adjustment, it's actually 30 million. So it went from 50 to 30. It's actually a decrease rather than an increase in budget spending.
Okay, okay. So this, so you, in general, you don't think it will alleviate, it will not lift the hardship by the end of the year. I mean, the prices, price increase, the price of all commodities skyrocketing, and the dollar rate is also rising and expected to rise, and at least it become very sensitive to any rumor. The dollar rate.
Of course, as you have stated, the adjustments in prices, the rise in prices, has not been accompanying to the rate of inflation. If we take the rate of inflation, it's considered to be anywhere from 200 to 300%. While also their plan is to have a rate of inflation at 95% for the entire coming year, while we've had threefolds of that much during this year. So a little optimistic, and based on a lot of things that are hard to achieve at the moment in all aspects. And I was especially shocked to see that one area which received maybe tenfolds an increase in spending was the cabinet of ministers. So it went from essentially 300 million to 2.6 billion. Even after adjusting, it's still almost 900 million. So that's threefolds increase in cabinet of ministers budget, while we are talking about a reduction in expenditure of the government, which is the main cause of inflation in the country.
Okay, okay, that's very, very alarming. Yes, this figure in itself, one figure is really alarming. If you are talking about the cabinet increase, is about 10-fold, 10 times the previous, just for the cabinet, for the council of ministers. Yeah. Something to me is very alarming. Okay, Dr. Yasser Abed. Abdurrahim, he mentioned that the budget is based on a lot of speculation and assumptions which are hard, too good to believe, say, let us say, or unlikely to happen. Like, for example, one of the item mentioned by the minister, that they are targeting the increasing the revenue of gold exports to $18 billion from $18 billion last time to 100, i.e. increased 82% in 1 year. How do you see this assumption?
According to me, I think so. This something seems like just imagination, because I don't know. It based on what I don't know. In which methodology it based? according to what we have known, that in mining sector, as we know, even now the production now is really decreased so much now. It's been announced now 33 only tons. And we are talking about the economic conference speaking about 250 tons and more. And now we are talking about the revenue of the gold from 18 billion to 100 billion. How do you, I don't know, the way it's been announced that figure, it's based on what I don't know, and in which methodology, because the statistic what is there in Ministry of or in mining, nobody can know that you can get that revenue, because as you know that 80% of the production of gold, it is from traditional gold, and only 15% or 10% from the concession companies, and maybe about 7 to 8% from the tailing companies. That one, if you talk about that one, speak about want to increase that one. That means you have targeted that production. What is the tools that and what is the tools of increasing the production accordingly to that revenue of 100 million, which is something very different. That means 80%, 82% more. They've increased 82%. That's nothing can be on that, and nobody can imagine the world in 1 year you can increase
From 18 to 100.
to 100. That's something very strange.
Too good to believe.
But that one is, this is part of the figures which is in the budget now. We have to look for something. How can we do the measurements for this? Because there is no any proximity measures for this budget, and how can we do the measures, the measurements for this budget? And because according to me, maybe we are going to go for a big risk if we put that type of figures like that. If you go to another sectors, also we are putting that figures. Also, that is another problem, because this is a big risk. It's a big risk. So how can we reduce that risk? We have to be, by the way, rational without speaking about figures which is like that, because now this is going to maximize the GDP. So those are the GDP. That means the increasement in the GDP is going not to be actual, because we're expecting now FDI, foreign direct investment. We're expecting a lot of finance. We're expecting a lot of projects. We have to be at least
Realistic.
in that side. Otherwise, we are going to face a problem, because this one going to put another heavy load to the currency, to the foreign currency even itself, because the exchange rate is going to be in a problem, because this is it's not the real figures and not the real prices on that. So if you are going to put, especially now we're talking about only the gold. If you speak about the rest of the GDP, like the real sectors, like livestock, like agriculture, like
Gum Arabic.
Gum Arabic. This is another issue also, because if you want to target the revenue, you have to target the production itself.
Yeah.
There is no plan, there is no strategic on that. And when I'm speaking about the methodology, is really completely absent on that. Especially even when you speak about the financial and the monetary and the gold policies. There is no any coordination between the both three sides of these policies. And we speak about also the trade policies. You're going to this is a part of the monetary policies, the banking system policies. That is all. It's worked in different fields and different without any coordination between the 3 or 4 policies. Especially if you come to the gold, you can't find the gold policies very clear. For me, it's not clear, because it's connected to where? Connected to the monetary, connected to the physical policies, or where? It has to connect with, because it is connected with the 3 policies: trade, finance, physical, and monetary policies.
So as if this is logical. It seems that you are talking about a very important issue, that the government or the government is estimating on something which they don't have all the threats.
It's true.
Production of the gold is completely out of control of the government.
Yes.
Export of the gold, and you know about the smuggling of gold, and the organized actually smuggling of gold. So all these factors are beyond the control of the government. So you cannot estimate, you cannot, even to, maybe even to a layman, if you tell a layman that we are going to increase the export of gold from 18 billion to 100 billion in 1 year,
$82%.
it looks absurd.
It's
What do you
true.
think, Abdurrahim, of this figure? This is very important figure because on it, the whole budget may maybe have been based, but even in the auditors, when they find one discrepancy in a certain item, they go over the whole thing.
Yes.
They go back to the whole. Once they find one, now this is, to me, I agree with you. It is a discrepancy. It is something absurd or unbelievable or too good to believe. What can you add to this, Abdurrahim?
Additionally to what Dr. Yasser said, let's not forget that gold is a major part of the smuggling issue which already exists and has been existing for the last several years. So I don't imagine that the 30 tons or whatever the amount the government has officially claimed as an export is maybe the 10% and the rest is what they want to increase, but still the mechanism is missing still, while all the other factors are not there, which make the smuggling not enticing anymore, but the official channels enticing. While that's still there, while it still persists, it's unlikely that you can bring all of that revenue through the official channels without making all the major changes or the policies, like Dr. Yasser said, which are holistic. We are still looking at numbers, figures that are not backed up by every aspect that needs to be counted for, let's say, in terms of policies and other aspects, so that this is actually generated or it's achieved. So from my perspective also, I think that it's unlikely
To happen.
I think so. Maybe let me just ask something small about what
Okay,
Mr. Sabra said. You can increase something, or you can target something. It's like revenue in taxes, or in custom. But here in gold, something completely different. Smuggling is there, and the storage, whether it's there, is stored. There's so much gold also is going another ways also, not only in smuggling. You know that one, it is difficult now to fix that specific figures, and that one also you are going to put it on your revenue, so that I think so you're going to face a lot of challenges, that, and that's the risk. In fact, by the way, it is really, if you can increase the increment maybe by 15%, 10%, something like that. Like you have to increase 82%. That is something has to be revised.
You have to be right. You don't have to depend on it completely.
Depending on it, that one is another issue. In fact, by the way, even the policies for the gold production, export, and selling and buying, it's not there. It's not clear in the budget even itself. That's another issue. Also, should be very clear for the investors, for the producers, for the local, for the internationally. It should be very clear. It's not that clear. It should be that the policies should be very clear on that, because it's been missing for a very long time since the last regime.
Okay, but to be fair on the minister herself, the minister or the government, the civilian government, some of the items, as we all know, that most of this gum Arabic and the gum is smuggled. Smuggling, to combat smuggling, is not a responsibility. It's a responsibility of the security institution. So the smuggling, I read in one article a long time ago that 65% of the export of gum Arabic are outside the banking system, which is smuggled.
It's true.
Gold may be also 60 to 65%. So whatever figure the Minister of Finance and Treasury put, if this not closed, this loophole in the economy, which is smuggling. Smuggling now is being protected. Smuggling now is organized.
It's reaching the economy, by the way.
This is
the big threat for the economy.
Yeah.
It's a big threat for the economy. By the way, even the gum Arabic, it is another issue also. But the problem is that even the policies itself is another issue. Why people going for the smuggling? Why they smuggle these products and because of the absence of the policies. It's no clear policies. The policies always change every time. So from Minister of Finance and Treasury, from Minister of Mining, from Central Bank, from whatever. This is why even from very long time, more than 20-something years, we have the gum Arabic is smuggled through all the borders. and another country is becoming now the biggest exporters for gum arabic. And gum arabic now, if you go to the how much the revenue of the gum arabic, it can be just a peanut.
Peanuts, not
According to
peanuts.
what we are producing now, almost 85% from the production of the world. That is another issue because now we are open with the world now. We are open with America. It should be very clear now.
But
We have to form at least a market for gum arabic because America is the biggest importer for gum arabic.
yes, okay, okay. Even the sesame is also
Sesame
being
is
smuggled
another.
from the east border of the country in this fertile area. It's called the Fashagat Bid, and Ethiopia actually export to China
Yeah,
about 400
from Fashaka
about
itself, even
400
from
million
Fashaka.
dollar worth of sesame. Okay, Abdurrahim Sabra, if we go to another figure, you mentioned in your talk about inflation. Now with the budget, it was mentioned that the inflation target, the minister is targeting reducing the inflation to 95%. And you said it is between 200 to 300% now about. Anyhow, it is somewhere in between. It is high. So is it also possible to, what will be the measures? How can we reduce from 300, from say 270% inflation to 95? Is it feasible? Is it easy to do?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask, if it is actually feasible to do. Well, we know that IMF has labeled Sudan as the third highest country in terms of inflation after Venezuela and Zimbabwe. IMF says 200%, other economists say 300% in terms of inflation 2020. How can we reduce all of this? Initially, Sudan is following the IMF recipe, what seems like it until now, which is harsh and drastic. And this is probably also the cause of the turmoil, a cause of the deterioration, because they would want Sudan to float their currency. And of course, we know that several ministers or the government has thought about this, but the conditions have not been in their favor in order to do so. Essentially, we need reserves in order to do floating, and until this happens, until it is actually let's say guaranteed or it's on solid grounds, not just a budget, I imagine that inflation will continue to skyrocket, because there will always be an official rate and a parallel market rate. And until this gap is closed, which we have no funds or capabilities to do at the moment, it will still continue. And we are now looking at a budget which has been submitted based on the official rate, while we know that the official rate is not realistic in any aspect of our lives in Sudan. So I also think the 95% rate of inflation will probably be difficult to maintain, even though it's a very high number. It's a very high number.
Even if it's 95, it's a high number.
It's a high number.
As inflation rate, most of the inflation rates in different countries is one digit, 5, 9%.
Like Egypt.
When it comes to 9%, good countries, they feel alarmed, and they do drastic measures to reduce it. So as you said, yes, even 95 is a high rate, very high rate.
But difficult.
But difficult. But still, yet, although it is high, but you believe that it is
Not
extremely difficult.
Yeah, extremely difficult.
Under the circumstances, this and the inflation, the dollar floating.
If we read between the lines, they're following an IMF recipe, and this does not include subsidies, and it includes, let's say, a unified exchange rate, and they cannot do this all in one dose, because we've already seen the effect of doing things over the past year and now, which have been too hard to swallow, let's say, for the population or the economy or the public. It's too much of a drastic change, especially at the point of deterioration that the country is moving to now. But I think everything is based on achieving this no subsidies and unified rate. Even the MOU, I think, signed by the Secretary Mnuchin of the United States states that the cooperation and the funding will commence once there is a unified exchange rate. So essentially there's no subsidies and there's a floating currency in respect to the dollar.
So you are saying that it is also very dangerous to go for floating the currency without enough cushion or without enough reserve, foreign reserve. Otherwise, if you do it, if you just flow it following the recipe of the IMF, so things will be a catastrophe, you think.
Yeah, Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
Will have money that's worthless.
Worthless. Paper. Okay, Dr. Yasser Abid, one of the important elements of the GDP, actually is important because the export is an element in the GDP because it involves attracting foreign money.
Yeah.
Do you think in the budget is there any provision from in the policies of the new government, the new budget, to encourage or to increase the export? Have you seen any in the budget any place that there are certain measures or certain items which will encourage or facilitate the export proceeds to increase to a reasonable figure?
You know, the budget is facing so much challenges, so much problems, especially from the reducing the inflation and how you target that, how you treat the inflation itself. That's part of the sickness, part of the problem. If you want to treat that one, or if you want to reduce the inflation, you can't reduce inflation through the budget. It cannot be. It's very difficult. You have to form a combined program or a plan to treat that inflation beside the budget. Budget let to go with these figures, with these biggest figures, but also you have to combine the budget with a program or with a plan to treat the inflation, to reduce the inflation. The inflation cannot be reduced by the budget. Cannot be. It's very difficult. From 300 to 95. It's very difficult. Itself, even as you mentioned, and Mr. Sabra mentioned that even 95 is a big figure. But also let's go to the 95%. But that one cannot be. In that one also, and back to your question about the export and the GDP, the export, in fact, the targeting, we are from very long time, we are targeting the export without knowing the source of the export. The source of that one is really a production. There is no any plan on plan for targeting the production and productivity. And who is responsible about that? Who is responsible? There is no plan in the Ministry of Finance. Who is planning on that? No planning. Only Treasury going through those figures, and Minister of Finance is doing only the Treasury work. But it's not targeting. There is no plan there. There is no plan, and there is no planning, and there is no strategic putting that one, because we need to produce this year around maybe 300,000 ton of gum arabic. We need to produce that this year because last year we have produced this type of gold. Let's produce this one because of these tools. We have give that sectors of mining these figures. How can we come to the GDP and increase the GDP with that big figures without production? The export itself, in fact, the policy of the export, so in 2020, it's been affected so much by export.
By export?
Yes, because the revenue of the export, it didn't come to the Minister of Finance. Most of it, there is so much problems, there is speculation, there is problem, there is smuggling, there is cheating, there is so much problem. That one itself, even I don't see there is a proper policies on that. It's even in the export. On export, there is we don't see them. If you go to the plan and planning on programs for the production for each sectors, we can't find also a specific plan for that. We need to go for a proper plan from Minister of Finance to show us what is the plan for different sectors, all sectors, each sector, how going to do the increase the production, and how can you increase the GDP without targeting the production itself. You know, like the manufacturing sectors is completely dead. No more than 95% is dead completely. If you go to the services, is the biggest than agriculture. Almost about 50-something% for services sectors, and livestock and agriculture is about 22%, and 19% only for manufacturing and industry sectors. That one is another issue. We have to be very clear on that. we have to look for another programs and plan how can we combine it to the budget. Budget itself cannot reduce the inflation.
Inflation cannot increase the
And
export. As you said,
cannot increase export. Never.
export
It will never increase
directly connected to production,
to production
and productivity.
And
So nobody's talking, nobody's minding
we haven't seen that. We haven't,
area.
especially even in gold itself,
Even
and
in gold.
agriculture. Now, if you go to this season of the winter season, if you go to the production of last year, maybe it's bigger than this year. We're going to face a lot of problems on wheat production also. That's another issue. That you have to import more. You have to put another currency. You know, there's a lot of issues. We have to be very careful. We must be very careful on that.
Okay, this is very important that export connected to production productivity.
Yeah.
So before talking to increase export, you have to talk about how
Yes.
to improve the
because this is a source for the export.
Export. Okay, Abdurrahim, we have another issue, which is, it seems, there is a lot of controversy in the different views. Maybe you and Dr. Yasir will have different opinions on the issue of the money itself. Some people, they are, especially the incubator, the freedom change and change, freedom for and change, they are talking about the currency, replacing the currency with new currency, which with a certain specification that cannot be counterfeited or something like this. Some other they say, one of them is the Minister of Finance itself. She's talking. She undermined actually the idea of the currency changing or replacing by new currency. This question might, it's good that it go to both of you. What is your, are you for the currency change, replacement the currency?
Before making a decision, I think I would want to know the objective behind the changing of the currency. This is also not clear. If it is just inflation, then maybe it's not the solution. If there is counterfeiting, there's smuggling, there's other objectives behind changing of the currency, then maybe it's a logical thing to do. The government, I think, has not been clear on the objectives behind changing of the currency. But if we rely solely on the economic objective or the inflation, maybe yeah, we would agree to a certain extent that it would not be a solution, or it would not have the major effect of the solution. Even if it's worrying about the majority of cash being outside of the banking system, we still know that the biggest buyer or the biggest utilizer of foreign exchange or foreign currencies is the government. So even if the private sector has a lot of money out of the banking system, it might be the nature that people do business in Sudan, that they don't do business to the banking institution. It's cash payments more of terms. And if the government is still the biggest buyer, or the entity which needs the most currency to get essential needs or strategic items on oil, petroleum, medicine, things like this, then this is probably an internal problem. It's not going to be solved if we change the currency, because the government is still the biggest buyer of hard currency in Sudan. So they might want to close this deficit so that they are not part of that black market as well. If this need is somehow given as a loan or as actual products, like we've seen some Gulf countries have done for Sudan in the previous years, then there won't be a need for the government to also be part of the purchasing power in the black market.
So you believe that this is a very sound and point, that the government is a big buyer for foreign currency, and these people they keep their money to natural currency outside the banking system because they want to sell and the dollar to the government. What is your opinion? Is it different or?
It's true. That's right. The government is one of the biggest buyer for the hard currency, and for the dollar itself. In fact, by the way, because of the needs of the government doesn't have resources and doesn't have that reserve in the central bank. That's another issue. This is why buying from the black market and buying from the and also buying the gold also the same way. Also the gold also the same way. Changing the currency, I think so. It is part of political issue, and they're speaking about changing the currency because to at least to reach to this money which is in the speculators whom they are outside the banking system, and those is really about more than 66% of the money which is outside the banking system. They want to reach to that one, but that one is another problem. If you change it today, tomorrow if they ask about their money, you're going to give them, you're going to refuse to give them, you can't. Very difficult. But now if you want to change the currencies because of so much problems or the smuggling of these currencies, you have to change the whole policies within program, within fixed program. If you name it a shock program or a normal program or extraordinary program or a normal program or a plan or whatever, within 3 years or whatever, from 6 months up to 5 years, you can do that one within that one. But changing the currency itself without another policies, it will be just going to be,
Fruitless.
you're going to add so much expenses on the government, which it's not can afford, is going to afford that one. Buying from the because the government has no any sources to get the hard currencies, and now this really is ignoring the production and leave the production and leave the whatever. So going for that type of treatment is going to give the economy so much problem, especially in the next years, maybe 2022. We're going to get another problem also. We have to look for a solution. We have to form a proper program, a proper plan, so that we can target the inflation, targeting the exchange rate, targeting the production, targeting the export. Without that one, you cannot make reforms. So you have to do stability in all indicators. Without stability, economic stability and political stability, so that we fix up to now we fix the exchange rate to this figure, and you just do the treatment and do the reforms. Otherwise, you are going to go for just trying to change things from here to here to there without doing that program. It will be a bigger problem.
So if we go to Abdurrahim, okay, that's very, very clear that the figures have to be carefully monitored and catered for by having all variables together. You have to include all
Full
variables.
package. Yeah, with the
Something.
full package
If
policies.
if you take one variable for neglect the other, it will be in
There's
trouble.
going to be a leakage there somewhere.
Okay, Abdurrahim, the Minister of Finance in the address of the announcing the budget, she talked about increasing the budget of the education about 170% from last year, high education also, and health care. So the figure she put some figure that this budget included increases in these three important sectors. What is your comment on these figures?
I think this point goes back to what we previously mentioned, is that the budget does not account for inflation. If we try to compare 2021 budget with the 2020 budget, in real terms, we see that the health sector went from 51 million to actually 25 million. So there's actually a reduction in real terms, because 51 million was last year, 91 million is this year, but in actual terms, after adjusting for inflation, there's a decrease. There's also a decrease in education in real terms, from 61 million a previous year to 34 million this year. Defense from 51 million to 30 million. Rapid support forces from 15 million to 12 million. What actually increased is social welfare in actual terms, from 47 million to 104 million. So there's an apparent increase in social welfare. And cabinet of ministers, like we said earlier, from 298 million to 880 million in actual terms. So now this is actual increase after adjusting for inflation. So 170% increase, as she mentioned, in health, while you have 300% inflation, is actually a decrease. It's not an increase in real terms. So this is what we said earlier about the numbers being misleading if these factors are not put in place. From my perspective, the only areas that have been increased is cabinet of ministers with an unusual increase 3 times in real terms, and social welfare.
Okay, so we believe that if you reduce the figures and with the current inflation rate, certainly most of the items is actually a reduction,
Yes.
not increase. Because when you talk about
Yes,
a certain figure, you have to include the inflation. At that time, the inflation was not 300%. When you talk about comparing last year inflation was not.
This is one based on one in fixed rate or in current rate or whatever. So this is it has to be very clear, because this is why, as
Abdul Rahim is
Rahim
saying, yeah,
mentioned that one,
this is
it
very
is really
important.
just matter of maximizing the figures and saying that this is the biggest budget since the independence, which is based on,
You cannot compare it in any way with
cannot,
the last year's budget because
depends on how do you fix it,
the inflation rate is gone.
how do you calculate it? How do you calculate it? In which one now? Is it $55 rate or 200 or 300 now at the black market, or which in which one?
Or inflation rate of 90, maybe last year it was 90, hardly 90. It's not reached
Almost,
90, but
almost.
today it's about 200 or 300. So this is it should have been they should have catered for this figure, because putting figures is not convincing to many people, because when they come to the reality, they find that the figures are not true. So inflation is really killing the economy of the
Even the
country.
incubators, also they have denied that. They have denied that one. The incubator, yes, the political incubators of the government,
Freedom Force.
freedom of force. They deny that one. They think that is also the same what you are saying. These figures is not depending on just matter of maximizing the figures in non-base.
Okay, Abdul Rahim, we have a very small, maybe we might run short of time, but we have a lot of questions, because both of you are scholars in this field. When the Minister of Treasury and Finance, she talked about borrowing from the banking system. One of the targets is that to reduce borrowing from the banking system from 200 billion pounds to 52. Also, it's a big reduction. Maybe in this way, bearing in mind, having the inflation aspect in our mind, do you think it is reasonable? Is it possible to have this drastic cut from 200 billion borrowing last year to only 52?
Again, this point will be subject to the same scrutiny of all the points which we've mentioned before. Based on a budget that is still very uncertain, let's say. All of this is based on revenues expected, loans which should be granted. Maybe we're too optimistic on the SST list removal, the IMF granting loans, World Bank, things like this. All of this reduction is based on something which is still not tangible. It's still not concrete. It's still not factual. So we are even budgeting expenditure that all of the government will begin spending, I imagine, as soon as the budget is finalized, which also is based on, let's say, not so much as concrete figures. So before we even get to the point of will she be able to reduce the borrowing, is will she be able to achieve all of the other aspects in the budget, which the budget is based on, that are still not concrete or certain at this point.
Okay. So these are important notes, actually, or reservations. You have to a lot of reservation in the assumptions, because any budget is based on assumptions. So as much as the assumptions are near to reality, the better. It's always the better that you have. But if you have big assumptions, like for example, removing the debt, the $60 billion from of Sudan. Okay, some countries are working hard on this. Okay, if you say about we are expecting $10 billion, this expectation, just expectation, which is connected to the stability of the country. If the country is politically not stable, nobody is willing to give you a penny
True.
unless they ensure that
Stability is
the
very
stability. So they should have talked about stability or put East and. Anyhow, um, do you think there are any, I asked Dr. Yasser Abed, the visit of the Minister, the Treasury of State, the Treasury of the Secretary of America, Treasury, he has visited and they concluded some agreement with the Exim Bank of America, Export and Import Bank. Will it have this agreements and this visit? Will it have any effect on this current budget? Will
Start.
it that be that so soon we expect to get to reap the the, 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 the the outcome of this visit and this of the two gentlemen, the minister, Treasurer of America, and the Exim Bank director.
It's a good start, by the way, from Treasury Minister of USA. It's a good start on giving Sudan 1.1 billion US dollar, and that one is going to go for treating or paying the debt arrears. Because we have 3.3 billion US dollar, we have to pay that one for the IMF. IMF is going to give it to the whole Paris Club debtors. So this is only the debt areas. So that money is going only just to activate the account of Sudan in IMF. That one give that sending message to the whole financial institution around the world that Sudan now its account is being activated through from very long time, since 20 years. It was frozen and now it's being activated. If once the international institution wants to work with Sudan, it's okay. That is MOU with Exim Bank. It is Exim Bank is it didn't appear before with Sudan in some loans and whatever, direct loan. Direct loans are expecting that maybe buying or selling something through the Exim Bank. That is all. That's the production, the products from USA. Maybe going to give that credit line for buying some products from USA. Maybe is technology equipment or maybe health equipment or something like that. But this is still an MOU. Up to now, we cannot say this is agreement, but it's MOU. An MOU might be changed anytime according to seeing the situation of Sudan, stability, political stability, security stability, economic stability is another problem also now, because this is all connected together. If we go into to financial institution, especially starting from IMF or international bank, without stability, nobody, as you mentioned, none of this institution can give us any money. That means we have to be very careful on that. We have to be very careful on what is a priority of our projects, or what our needs, what we need. Are we need only money just to put in central bank and tomorrow we've finalized, or what do we need? We need something. We have to be very specific. What do we need from the international community? What do we need from the donors? What do we need from the donors and the Sudan friends? We have to be organized internally. Otherwise, we're going to be just like that. We'll go around without going to our targets.
To the target, okay. Okay, but
We
the
have to be serious on that.
last question, it's very good. Okay, Abdurrahim, last question, maybe you can share it because we have only a few minutes, about 4 minutes. The issue of subsidies and floating the currency. These are the most important articles or items in the recipe of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank. Without this, they will not cooperate with any country. So what will be, in the short term, what will be the effect of lifting subsidies completely and floating the currency?
I think it's very difficult to state or understand that there's a clear path to achieving this, and I think even the government is not clear about how this can be achieved. They know that it must be done, but the mechanism in which to achieve this, or over what period or what process, and which becomes first and second, and in what degree, this is very uncertain, and it's become apparent in the way things are done, that suddenly there's an immediate lift of subsidies on petroleum, but there's talk that it will not happen to medicine or wheat or other aspects, or cooking gas, but we still don't have availability of these products. So even with subsidies, there's still deficits. There's still inability to acquire foreign exchange, which will prolong the agony. Either there's reserves that the wallet for strategic items is operating, it has enough money to buy these items, or we're going to continue in seeing all these long lines, these shortages and things like this. Ideally, the government would have funds to lay out a plan to achieve this or lift the subsidies over a certain period of time and essentially float the currency. But it might be apparent that they don't have enough reserves or certainties in order to have a concrete plan in place.
So it is difficult.
I think so.
Okay, in
The
1 minute, you
problem.
have only 1 minute, okay.
Okay, we are in high seas with IMF,
Uh-huh.
which you cannot come back. Subsidies already been
Already
lifted.
going on.
The floating of the currency now is going, and that one, in fact, is going to give us so much problems. I think so. I'm not going to say that. I'm not optimistic on the next years. We are going to get in a big problem with this IMF. It's not going to help. In fact, by the way, it's not going to give us only direct loan from IMF, from international bank. We'll never expect that one, even from the rest of the world. Even they're going to promise us, but they're not going to give us. We have to look for another alternative. But unfortunately, now we are in high seas with IMF. We are just implementing what we want, and since the independent, we are following the recipe of the IMF. We and the rest of the third world and developing countries, and we're still in the same position, and we cannot go beside that unless we depend on internal resources.
Okay, that is very good. Thank you, dear gentlemen, for being with me in this episode, talking about a very important issue, this budget and its effect, and the subsidies. All items we covered, maybe quite reasonably.
Yeah.
Most of the worries of the people, and both of you were very transparent, and you put your views, which is will be definitely helpful. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us in the last 50 minutes, and hope to see you next Friday, next week, on another issue. Thank you, and bye.